get going. I want to thank everybody for joining us today. We've got Kevin Stewart, who is going to help us understand some tips about drip irrigating hemp. It's a really great presentation, and you know, hemp's such a popular subject today. And it's a crop that people don't have a lot of experience growing, and we don't have a real wide database of information to gather from. So that's why we're so lucky to have Kevin with us today. You know, Kevin's somebody that I've known for a while now that is a real expert in irrigation. And one thing I really respect about Kevin is that he really grew up in agriculture. This is something that is in his DNA. And I always learn a lot when I talk about irrigation or drip with Kevin. So I'm really excited to hear his presentation again today. I also want to mention that I will be muting everybody but Kevin for the presentation, but we do have a chat feature at the bottom of the screen. And please feel free to type your questions into the chat, and I will be asking those questions of Kevin where appropriate, if it's during his presentation or at the end. So again, thanks everybody for joining, and I want to say welcome to Kevin, and thanks very much, Kevin, for leading this.
You bet. Yeah, I'm happy to be here, Richard, and thank you for the introduction. And again, my name's Kevin Stewart. I'm the sales director for our ag division in North America. I've been with Jane for about 11 years. I've been in the drip micro industry for 21 years. And just over the last couple of years, we really had a great opportunity as an industry to learn more about hemp. And it's been a bit of a wild ride. Last year was pretty exciting. And as far as 2019, and it'll be interesting to see kind of where we go in 2020. I think it really kind of depends on who you talk to, you know, what the expectations going to be. But if you're in ag, if you're in irrigation, you've probably had the opportunity to be around this crop, to maybe you know, see it from far away or be up, you know, close in person. But it really has progressed as far as in acres over the last couple of years. When you think about it, hemp is in, you know, tens of thousands of products, and it's really, you know, being adopted and used in everything. So I think, you know, we'll take maybe the next 30 or 40 minutes, and we'll talk about you know, 10 important steps that we feel as a company that will be beneficial to growers, to irrigation providers, crop consultants, or just anybody that wants to learn more about this crop. So let me back up. It's just a quick overview on what hemp really is. You know, it's a species that comes from the cannabis sativa. It's really native to Asia, but it was naturalized here in the US back in the 18th century. Hemp contains a level of THC that is less than 0.3%. So, you know, if that's the magic threshold. If it goes over 0.3%, it's considered marijuana. If it's below 0.3%, it's considered hemp. It has a pretty impressive root system. We've seen, you know, if conditions are perfect and, you know, there's no, you know, hard pan in the soil, the root system can go really as deep as 6 feet. So pretty impressive. It can grow up to 6 to 15 feet, depending on the variety and the type of hemp that you're growing. And hemp, it's a short day summer annual crop that's really strongly photoperiod sensitive, which means that it needs a lot of sunlight to grow. If you really get below 10 hours a day in sun, it wants to go from that vegetative state into a flowering state. So needs a lot of sunlight to stay in business. And I was mentioned, this has been a new crop for Jane over the past few years. We've seen rapid growth, in our business from a drip tape standpoint, and we wanted to share a few things that we've learned, and then we'll focus in kind of on those 10 key topics. But the first one, and really this applies not only to hemp, but really to to most crops. It's really important to find a ground that is well suited for the crop that you're going to plant. So with hemp, it really flourishes in a well-drained soil. It doesn't like mucky soils with too much water accumulation in it. A loam soil is really preferred on this, and I've got just this. I think most people are familiar with this textural triangle, but this identifies kind of the soil texture where hemp will really flourish. And so a good loam soil is really conducive to growing the good crop. And people that aren't familiar with this, if you just kind of go down the line, if you look at the silt separate percent, you probably want to have kind of that that 80% silt, 50% sand, and maybe 10 or 20% clay as far as that makeup. So any of these loam soils really would be conducive to growing this crop. We'll talk a little bit about the pH level, but kind of really seems to do well in a slightly acidic soil from 6.0 to 7.5. Heavy soils can cause issues with what we call damping off, which is really it's a pathogen for the seed. And not only do we see this in hemp, but we see it in onion seed and other vegetable seeds as well. And it really weakens the vigor of the seed, and you just don't see really the growth of that. So organic matter seems like the magic number is 3.5% or above, and so really does well in that. Most soils range anywhere from 2% to 6% in organic matter. So you want to really make sure when you're looking for a site selection that you understand what percent organic matter you have. I certainly would do some kind of a soil test, something that's uniform for the field, and take that to an accredited soils laboratory just to make sure that you've got a good understanding on kind of what you're getting into, and just to be prepared so that you can kind of farm around any challenges that might be out there. The next key point that we wanted to focus on are planting dates, and with 2/3 of the hemp that is grown in the U.S. That is grown for CBD. So again, 2/3 of all the planted acres that are grown around the U.S. are really, for that CBD market. I really kind of want to focus more on CBD and kind of that variety and that market. So you certainly want to plant early enough to allow for 120 days of a growing season, and you don't want to plant before your last frost in the spring. And so you want to make sure that you're not planting before that, getting in after that, and making sure that you are in a climate that will allow you to have 100 to 120 days of a growing season to get that crop established. So the ideal depth on this is really a very shallow planting. You want to be just barely scratched under the soil surface, maybe a 1/2 inch to an inch. I wouldn't go any deeper than an inch. What happens is, if you get too deep, I mean, it's just like any crop, it might have a hard time kind of breaking through, especially if you have any, cracking in the soil or any crusting, that might pose a problem. So yeah, you're going to want to make sure that you shallow plant that. You really want to look for a soil temp kind of in that 45 to 50 degrees. That's really going to be ideal to get a good germination. And there has been research that suggests that the later you delay, especially in a short growing season area, maybe where I live in Idaho, if you push this back a few weeks to maybe up to a month, you really can see a significant decrease in yield production. So you want to make sure, wherever you're at, that you take that into account and make sure that that you got enough growing days, for that period, and that you're not delaying things too much. Irrigation really plan to engineer and design a system that's going to allow you to apply 20 to 30 inches of water for the season. And again, that 20 to 30 inches, that's really more of a drip. If you're using furrow or sprinkler, it might be a little bit more than that, just because your emission uniformity and your DU may not be quite as good. But yeah, we think that 20 to 30 inches is really a good amount for optimal growth, really for the plant to complete its life cycle. It's important to really manage your water in the beginning stages of it, as it's a seedling and vegetative stage. You don't want to miss an irrigation or not have the water get to that seed. So research suggests that really the first 6 weeks are really important to help develop that root system and get that stalk to about 30 inches in height. So we think the drip is an excellent way to achieve that, where you're really just spoon feeding that crop or that root system or that area, not only with water, but also with fertilizer. And so we think it's a great way to get that plant off to an early start and provide it the water and nutrients that it's going to need. So we're talking about water and irrigation, and we at Jane certainly don't want to limit anyone's options. And we realize that there is no one size fits all type approach to anything. And we have as a company have made a lot of investments. We take a lot of pride in offering multiple products to really kind of hone in on what's going to be the exact best option for your field. Two products I just put on the screen here. They're both drip tape products that we make here in the United States. One is made in New York, which is the Chapin drip tape. And it's pretty cool. We've been building this product for over 50 years. Now we've had improvements and we've had iterations and different improvements over the years. But I take a lot of pride working for a company that's been invested in this market for a long period of time, and that's our continuous style emitter. We also have a discrete emitter that we make in Fresno, California, which is an individual plastic emitter that's welded into the drip tape. And we can put that really at any spacing. We've got multiple flow rates, and you can kind of really just tailor it to exactly kind of the spacing and flow that you're going to need. So both tape options are really good, and we sell a lot of both of these tapes into the hemp market. So I just wanted to kind of highlight that. I wanted to talk a little bit about kind of drip tape selection and just the things that someone needs to consider when you're looking at this. Here you can see we make more than just this, but you really want to make sure that you've got the right inside diameter for your field. Anything that's probably in that 3 to 600 feet in range, you really want to use a 5/8 inside diameter tape. If you're going to get into that 800 feet and further, you'll definitely want to consider a 7/8. We also make a 1-inch tape, an 1 1/8 tape, and an 1 3/8 tape, but we just don't really see that. We don't use those products a whole lot in hemp. These are really the two primary types, either a 5/8 or a 7/8. And the only thing that really would determine which one you need is really how long your field is and how long you really want to run that drip tape and maintain a 90+% emission uniformity. The next thing that you want to really take into account is the mill thickness, which is really the thickness of the plastic of the drip tape. And if you're holding up a piece of paper, I think most sheets of paper are about 1 mil thick, just to kind of put it in perspective. We make anything from a 4 mil all the way up to a 20 mil. But for hemp, we really feel like kind of our experiences is you really shouldn't go less than an 8 mil. We think 8, 10, 12, 13, 15, 20 mil, great options. And your soil best. If you think you have problems with insects or disease, or you think there's a little bit of rocks or pebbles or material in your soil that might be a little bit rough, you're probably going to want to err on the side of caution and go with maybe a 10, 13, 15 mil, maybe even a 20 mil. So what we want to do is provide options for you. But we wouldn't suggest that you use anything less than an 8 mil. I'm sure it's been done. In fact, I know of growers that have used a 6 mil. And I know of one grower in particular that really struggled with it, just because there's a lot of foliage and he had a little bit of insect pressure. And most of what we have sold has been in 8 mil and above. And up to the top, you can see this illustration of a drip tape, and it's just I don't know if Richard, can you see my cursor when I?
Yeah, I can see it just great. Everybody can. Thank you.
Okay, perfect. So in our chape and drip tape, you've got just a kind of a diagram of how the water moves through these individual inlets. Each one of these inlets is really, I call them filters. They're filtering inlets. And it doesn't take every one of them to be working. You can plug some of these. You can plug maybe half of them, and you're still going to get enough water to go through these secondary inlets, which again are filtering inlets, to where the water will flow through this tortuous path. It creates a vortex in the water, a velocity. And you got to remember, as the water's in the primary chamber, you're probably in that 10 to 12 psi range. As it goes through these inlets and through this track, it's got a pretty difficult job to do. You want to lower that pressure. You want to slow things down so that water's coming out at an even, consistent amount, so that it's coming out when it comes out of this outlet right here, which in this case is just a cut. The way it's cut with a blade, and the water will come out a drop at a time. But when it's coming out here, it's really at maybe 1 psi, and so it's really slowing things down. So from 10 psi in this primary chamber, is it's making its way through. The drip tape has a lot to do to try and make sure that it's slowing things down, so that it comes out at a drop at a time, but keep things moving, that you don't plug up your emitter track. So a lot of engineering goes into making this work. Also wanted to talk real quick about just selecting the right spacing and the right flow rates.
Kevin, we just have a couple questions I'd like to ask. I think it's appropriate to ask at this time. And one of the first questions is, is this tape only used for a season, or can you use it for multiple seasons? What about that?
Yeah, so most of our experience, when you go, 8 mil, 8 mil is generally used for one season. You get into 10 mil and you can get multiple seasons out of it. Where this is such a new crop for us, we've sold 15 mil, which is 15 thousandths of an inch thick, a pretty good durable product to, we sold, a few thousand coils to a grower on the East Coast, and they put this 15 mil in for one use. They injected it just below the soil surface, maybe 2 to 3 inches deep. And once they were done with it, after harvest, they pulled the tape back out, and they sent it to a recycler and had it recycled. So there's a lot of things that we still don't know. When you get into those heavier mill thicknesses, we like to get multiple uses out of it, or we like to bury it in the ground. There's places in Kansas, Nebraska, Texas, Oklahoma, where we take that 15 mil drip tape in kind of a corn, soybean rotation, maybe cotton, and we bury that about a foot deep, and we leave it in the ground for as long as we possibly can. Kansas State did a really good study, and they've continued this study, but they had one of our drip tapes in the ground. It was our Chapin drip tape, and it lasted in the ground for 25 years. It was a 15 mil product that was buried a foot deep, and they got 25 years out of it. It was a corn soybean rotation, and it worked just fine. So,
yeah, that's great, Kevin. Thank you. And then another question on this is that should you be using pressure regulation?
Pressure regulation, yes. Drip irrigation is a low pressure, low flow, high frequency. When I say high frequency, you want to irrigate every couple days. But when you think of a sprinkler irrigation or center pivot irrigation that operate at much higher pressures, 35, 40, 50, plus PSI, we're operating at 10 PSI. And so any good irrigation dealer knows how to design a system and source the right components, the valving and the pressure regulation devices to kind of get that pressure down to really where you need it so that when it's in the drip tape, you're at 10 PSI. Now, I don't know if the question was also about pressure compensating tape, and I'm gonna, if we can hold off on that, I'm gonna get to it in a slide or two, but that's where, regardless of the pressure, the flow will remain the same. So
yeah, so good. Yeah, looking forward to the pressure compensating as well. And then the last question on this is: were these fields no-till fields, or were they tilling the soil?
Most of it was tilled ground. So for CBD production, I don't know too many fields, and I'm not going to proclaim that I've been to, every field, but most fields that I've been to have had conventional tillage done to it. I do know that you can grow hemp just fine for, say, fiber or maybe for grain. And I think there's places in the Dakotas and the Midwest where I think they have gone to more of a lower tillage, maybe a no-till type system. Hemp is a pretty resilient plant, so it doesn't necessarily need everything completely worked for it to grow and produce.
Great, thank you, Kevin. That's our last question.
Okay. So again, just talking about spacing, for CBD, most of these are within the row. Most plants are, about 5 feet apart, give or take. And that doesn't mean that every 5 feet you should have an emitter, because the way these roots grow underground, it almost kind of turns into more of a hedge type system. We recommend that you're anywhere from 12 to 24 inches. If you wanted to go below 12 inches, we certainly have options there. We've just we've tried to kind of create some products that we know will really work for that. So 12 inches and above seem to be really good. Both low flow and medium flow rates have kind of really been our choice for products. I've listed just a few common products that we have available, both in our Cascade and our Chapin products, so that you can see here. Not to confuse anyone, but when we talk about drip tape, when we talk about discrete emitters, those are measured in gallons per hour per individual emitter. And when we talk about Chapin, we talk about gallons per minute per 100 feet. And so it can get a little confusing. We go back and forth quite a bit on that. But if you have any questions, there's a number of us at Jane that could explain that in greater detail and could help really select a product that's going to be good for your application. We talked a little bit about pressure compensating products, and we know that not everything is flat. And if you've got any kind of a slope, for every foot that you drop in elevation, you're gaining about not quite a half a pound of PSI. So as you're going down and you've got multiple feet that you're dropping, you're gaining excess pressure. And what that does is it creates a poor uniformity across from top to bottom. Chances are the bottom part of your field is going to get more water than the top part. The workaround on that is to use a pressure compensating product. We have one that we call Top Drip that we put in a 20 mil polyethylene tubing for both 5/8 or 7/8, and we have two flow rates that we feel really kind of work. We've got a 0.15 gallon per hour, which is considered a low flow product, and then we have a 0.26 gallon per hour, which is considered a medium flow. And we can put those really in any spacing. We found that 16 inches and 18 inches really seem to work good, so that we've tried to condense some of these. I mean, there's thousands of options, but we've tried to create kind of a hemp program or a shorter list of products that we know will do a good job in irrigating. I wanted tip number 5 is managing your weed pressure. And if you don't get on top of this really can create a major havoc. You're making a huge investment into this crop, and really there's two components that are critical to keeping the weed pressure down. And again, I'm focused again on CBD, but I think plastic mulch is probably really the way to go on this. It creates a physical barrier, and this is just a good photo where you can see you got a little bit of slope to the field, but we put plastic mulch here, and that way you can kind of work in between the rows and manage the weed pressure there. But it really shouldn't be all that much, because you're not putting water there if you're using drip irrigation in conjunction with plastic mulch. So that drip tape would go right underneath that plastic mulch, just offset of the hemp plant. And between the two, it's a good combination. I know of a grower, a friend of mine, that farmed a couple hundred acres of hemp, did not use plastic mulch, used drip irrigation, and there's a combination of overhead and drip. And he, for his field, I mean, he had about a $60,000 labor bill as far as to go through and hand pick that. So just be, if you're planting into bare ground and you're not using drip and you're not using plastic mulch, you're going to use overhead irrigation, where this is a newer crop, there's not a lot of registered herbicides or pesticides that can be used. Although people are making progress in that as of right now. I only know of, I think, 10 products that are labeled for hemp. 8 of those are biopesticides, and the other 2 are conventional, and they're really more geared towards trying to take care of insect or, the fungicide in the soil, the fungus in the soil. So one other option is to plant later in the season. So if you have a long growing season, you can maybe, let those weeds come up, spray them, and then plant the crop. So that is another way to kind of get around that. So with plastic mulch film, I think a lot of people use like a 1 mil plastic mulch. They use white for cooler, or excuse me, for warmer areas where they're trying to kind of cool that soil down a little bit, and use black, for areas where you're actually trying to warm the soil. One thing that's really important is to get these plants up as fast as you possibly can. You can get them up to about 1 foot high in the first few weeks. You might be able to shade out your weeds, at least within the row. And so pretty important, right? To make sure that you get your fertilizer and your irrigation set up so that you can drive those plants, get them up to 12 inches, get them a foot tall, and shade out those weeds. Fertilizer. That I guess I would start everything off with. I think the best thing for any grower or anyone that wants to invest in this crop is to make sure that you get a soil test. Make sure that you have a good relationship with your crop advisor, and they'll be able to point you in the right direction. I think research has shown that you're going to need about 100 pounds of nitrogen to kind of take this crop through its life cycle. You're going to need about 45 to 70 pounds of phosphorus and about 35 to 80 pounds of potassium. But I certainly wouldn't, just use that as a general statement. I would make sure that you test that soil and you understand what's already in it. We talked about hemp doing very well in high organic matter soils, and so if you've got ground that's been idled, that's had some kind of grass or something in it, that would be maybe a good option to go into. But you definitely want to make sure you know what your level of organic matter is. The pH, managing pH in the soil for hemp, pretty important. And we talked about it does best in kind of that 6.0 to 7.5, right? So you can see, I'm sure most of you understand how this is, but the lower the pH, the more acidic it is. The higher the pH, the more alkaline it is. We're suggesting that you stay right here, kind of in the 6 to 7 range. And if you do that, you're going to make sure that you're really kind of facilitating the growth and creating kind of an optimal environment for it to take up those nutrients. Research has shown that if you can be in that 6 to 7.5 in pH, it will take up nitrogen more efficiently. It'll take up phosphorus and potassium, which are all important nutrients, not only for the vegetative, but also for the flowering stage. Drip irrigation is an excellent way to manage this. And so you can put small doses with frequent applications of either acid or chlorine, to lower or raise the pH in that soil. Crop rotation is important. And you can grow hemp kind of back to back in a continuous cycle, but you do need to be at least aware that you could build up resistance, whether it's weeds or insect or any kind of a pest. Some common pests that hemp growers deal with are rootworm borers. There's some rot and some mold. as well. But so yeah, you can grow it back to back. I think the better option is to find a good rotation that will work for you and work for the plants. As far as things I've learned, you don't want to follow hemp after canola, after an edible bean or soybeans, and you want to not follow it after sunflowers. And the biggest reason for this is of white mold, and so I think there can be some buildup. So just know that as you're trying to plan your cropping system, kind of what crops you should maybe not follow as you're rotating this hemp crop through. Tip number nine is keeping the THC below 0.3%. I have a hard time pronouncing THC, but it's the tetrahydrocannabinol oil. You want to 0.3% is the magic number, right? So if it exceeds that, it's not hemp anymore. It's considered marijuana. If it's less than 3%, it's considered hemp. I think it's worth noting that I think 10% of the acres that were planted, research has shown has exceeded this 0.3%, or as people say, it's gone hot. It's got hot. So that's a serious problem because if it does exceed that, you've got to destroy your crop. I guess you do have an option to retest it, but but if the test comes back the same, you're going to be in a bit of a mess. So things that you can do to kind of make sure that you're not exceeding that level. First is probably is genetics. You want to find a good variety that, and I'm sure there's people that have tested this, but I think there's varieties out there that are probably more susceptible to exceeding that level. And you also want to make sure that you don't stress the crop. You don't want to give it too much water, and you don't want to give it too little. You don't want it to be too hot. You don't want it to be too cold. If you give it, too much NP or K or not enough, these are all things, right, that can cause stresses to the plant and can cause it to kind of make that spike. If the weather's too hot or too cold, so if you've got really hot days and really cold nights, right, that should be taken into consideration. I think higher elevation, cooler weather, that could pose a problem for it as well. And this is a moving market that's really fast. But as far as what I know right now, I don't think if you exceed 0.3% in THC, I don't think crop insurance covers that. And so if it does, somebody could reach out to me, but I don't think it does. And as far as if you want to know how to sample for that, after your crop has flowered, you want to take the top 3 to 5 inches off of that plant and get it tested. And there's a whole process for testing your plant. But yeah, you definitely want to keep it below 0.3%. And so the things that I discussed, I think, are good steps that you can do to try and manage this and keep it at that or less. And really the last thing is harvest. For CBD, it really is all about the flower. You want to make sure that you avoid any kind of mildew that builds up on this. It's going to lower the value of kind of that biomass. So I think there's some mechanical harvest, but I think most harvest is really hand harvested, and you really want to look when the buds are kind of turning from white to more of an amber color. That's a good indication. I've included a picture here, kind of an up close, where you can kind of see what they call the trichomes on that. And when those go from kind of a clear to more of a milky color, again, that's kind of a telltale sign that it's time to harvest. Another thing you want to consider is the percent level of CBD in the plant. I think that's probably what most people use is, they're regularly testing that on a weekly basis to see what, percent. I know a lot of people that really don't want to harvest until they're at 10%. That might be a little bit of a lofty goal, but one thing to consider, and this is just more of a kind of on an extreme, but just to give an example, if you had 1,000 pounds of biomass that was harvested on 1 acre of ground, and the difference when harvesting was say 6% versus 7% in CBD, that 1% difference is equivalent to 10 pounds of CBD oil. And so some math, I don't know exactly where the market is right now, but if you have, say the price is fetching $5 a gram and there's 450 grams in a pound, that 1% difference can result, in this example, a $20,000 per acre, monetary difference. So I think it's really important to make sure that you understand kind of what you're looking for, and just make sure that that you're armed with information as you're going in, trying to figure out. You certainly want to harvest before it gets too wet, and there's a whole process on storing hemp and how you want to do that. I'm not going to go into that, but I think I'll end here with the topic of harvest. And so we've gone over 10 key points that I hope you've at least taken notes or learned a few. Walk away with a few points that you can advise people that you work with, or if you're a hemp grower yourself, that maybe this is a reminder, maybe it's new information that you can use that will help you grow and produce a better crop and be successful as a grower. So we're certainly here as an organization to help, and you can reach out to anybody at Jane Irrigation. You can reach out to myself, and I didn't list my number here, but I think we'll find a way, right? If you have more questions, or if you want to, give us the contact. If anyone that does reach out to me, we're in the final stages of producing our hemp brochure, which has been a pretty good activity for us. It's a high quality brochure that has a lot of different steps and processes and procedures that will help make you a better grower with this crop. And go ahead and reach out to myself or Richard Rastusha. If you do, we'll make sure that when we have that complete, we're almost done. We'll make sure that we get that into your hands. And with that, I think, Richard, I'm done with my presentation, and I'd be more than happy to answer any questions.
Yeah, Kevin, a fantastic job that you really got into some good detail, appropriate amount of time, and what a wealth of knowledge. I've got a few comments already from some of the people watching, how helpful this has been. I have a couple questions lined up here, and maybe we'll get some more. But first question I have is it, and this is getting out of the realm of irrigation for hemp, but one of the questions that comes up is hemp legal to grow all over the United States now? It's
not. I live in the state of Idaho, and it's against the law to grow it here in Idaho. I think I don't have a map. You could Google this. I think, I don't want to misspeak, but I think South Dakota, I think it's illegal to grow it in South Dakota. I think there's about 3 or 4 states, or maybe it's 2 or 3. But yeah, I think it will come to a point in time where it'll be legal across the United States. But there's a few states that have held out, and I think they look at this as kind of a slippery slope. That if you're growing hemp, could that lead to where I live, in Idaho, a bit of a conservative state. I don't think they would ever want marijuana, legalized or grown, and I think that's one of the main reasons. But the growers, I've got a lot of people I know that are really anxious to grow it in my state. And what they're doing is they're going to Oregon, and they're growing it the eastern part of Oregon.
Yeah, so thank you. So then another thing that came up was this whole idea of crop insurance, right? And I always say the time that you learn the most about insurance is after you need it, right? You learn all the details at that point. But so there's a lot of testing that goes into this hemp to make sure the THC is below the proper amount. Do you do all that testing yourself? Does somebody come out and do this, from an agency? What does that look like?
Yeah, I think it's state regulated. But yeah, somebody comes out to your. Well, let me back up. When you grow hemp, you've got to apply for a license to grow hemp, right? You just don't wake up and say I'm going to grow 5 acres of hemp and not tell anybody. And so you're fully on board with sharing that information. But no, that is I think it's at a state level where there is some regulatory arm that will come out and they'll do that test, or they'll watch you take that sample and do that test. So it's not something that you just do on your own.
Yeah. Okay, we had another question about a separate cannabis catalog or a separate hemp catalog at Jane, which I don't think we have any plans for right now. Maybe that'll change, but in the meantime, what products, how should somebody be looking for the proper products for a hemp crop?
I think the biggest thing, we don't have a catalog, but we do have a brochure that kind of details out, a number of things from drip tape selection to making sure that you've got the right filtration requirements. We speak a little bit about valving. We talk about some of the different fittings and accessories and the submains. So while we don't have a catalog that's geared specifically towards hemp, we're developing a brochure, and that's led by our marketing manager, Michael Darawenko. He's anxious to get this done and complete, and I think we're getting really close to having that complete.
Great, thank you. So we have another question about how deep you suggest burying the drip tape.
Yeah, probably a couple inches. You gotta, if you're not gonna leave it in the ground, let me back up. If this is just gonna be something that that you're gonna pull out of the ground and recycle, I wouldn't bury it very deep. I try and stay closer to the surface. I wouldn't put it on the surface, but I'd put it probably 2 to 3 inches deep. If you know that you found a way that this rotates into your conventional cropping system, and you think that putting tape maybe every 30 inches between laterals and leaving it in the ground and burying it a foot deep, you're gonna, as long as you work out your tillage practices, there's no reason why you can't leave that in long term. I will. With that said, I will bring up that finding a good maintenance program and making sure that you routinely follow that is going to be critical, and making sure that you've got good filtration to protect your investment will be critical as well.
Great, thank you. So this next question starts out with the way I answer almost every question, and it says, it depends. I know, right? Always conditional, but what are some of the best ways the successful growers are using frequency of irrigation? Are they watering daily? Are they waiting a couple days in between? What are you seeing out there that's most successful?
Yeah, I think most successful is finding a good technology platform that will allow you to monitor and understand how much moisture is actually in your soil and how much the crop is depleting. And Jane Irrigation has a complete team that's dedicated to helping growers monitor their irrigation systems, and then also to automate their irrigation systems to where you basically the technology is there where you can turn the pump on, you can turn it off if you want it to just based off of we think that you're good with irrigating, then you can turn that system on. And so yeah, I would suggest using technology that's available. We have that, and certainly can put you in contact with the right people. I myself know a fair amount on it. I'm not an expert in that, but I can certainly talk to that and get you in contact with the right people.
Great, thank you. We have another question about the KC factor for hemp. Has anybody done enough research on this to kind of get a good idea of where that is and where it is in different maturities?
Good question, and I don't know the answer to that.
Yeah.
I don't know if that information is out there.
Yeah, I haven't seen much either on that, right? I think it's something we're still, or some of our friends at Fresno State and other places are still trying to figure out. But yeah, I haven't either. So, well, listen, Kevin, I want to say thank you again for a great job today. I want to say thank you to all the people who attended our training, Kevin's training. He did a wonderful job. And, as we are in this unique shelter-in-place situation, we're going to continue to bring you these educational virtual lunch and learns over the next few weeks or months, whatever it may be. We really do appreciate you taking time, and look for our next couple of virtual lunch and learns next week. We'll have some emails out to everybody letting you know when those are and what the subjects are. And by the way, if you have some suggestions for subjects, things that you guys would really like to see, please send them to me or send them into the email that we send you about the training. That would be great. We're always happy to take suggestions and respond to that. So again, Kevin, great job. Thank you everybody for joining.
Thank you. Had a great time.
Yeah, thank you. And we'll see you all next week. Thanks now.
Thank you.